Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Boss Body Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Sarah Haas, and I am so glad that you are here. This week, I am continuing my conversation from last week in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. As most of you know, I am a breast cancer thriver. I am 2.5 years cancer-free, and I am healthy, I am vibrant, I am strong, I feel amazing. And going back into the discussion about breast cancer is, let's say, a little uncomfortable for me. It stirs up a lot of fears and past memories, but I feel like it is so extremely important to talk about. And so I made this a 2-part series. Last week, I talked a lot about getting diagnosed with breast cancer, how I found it, the statistics, and different ways of prevention. Because the fact is, 1 in 8 women in the US will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. And I never want anyone else to have to go through what I went through, and anything that I can do to prevent you from becoming that 1 in 8, I'm going to shout from the rooftops. This week, I want to dive in a whole lot deeper. Now that we've discussed all the logistics about breast cancer, I want to talk a lot more in depth about my own internal experience and the lessons that I learned, because I believe that we're all put on this earth for different purposes, and we're here to learn lessons, and we're here to teach lessons. And when we go through something and we make a transformation, I think it's so important to talk about it so that others can use that and apply it to their lives. So I learned a whole lot throughout my journey, and I want to share some of that with you this week. First of all, when I was diagnosed, I was not even thinking of or aware of this is a bigger lesson, or, what am I meant to gain from this? The initial feeling was 100% just absolute fear and shock. There was the diagnosis, and then tests, all kinds of CT scans, PET scans, ultrasounds, bone scans, because they have to determine the extent of the cancer. And I was one of the very lucky ones who only had cancer regionally, which means it was only in the area of one of my breasts, and it had not spread to other parts of my body. But that waiting and that testing was a brutal time, because you know how it is when you're waiting to hear back from any kind of test. You're just on pins and needles, and it seems like it takes forever. So just going through that and just facing so many fears was unbelievable. But once we had that figured out, and I had met with the oncologist, and we had a care plan, and I knew what I was in for, and I could kind of wrap my brain around it and just sort of start gathering up the courage to put one foot in front of the other. At least I knew I could start going forward and not have to wait around anymore and wait to hear what kind of news was coming. And so I went into a place of prayer, which a lot of people do during difficult times. I definitely believe that there's a higher power, and the universe is benevolent, and that everything happens for the greater good. And I knew I needed something to grab onto. I needed something to ground me. And just to get through it, I really went into a deep state of asking my higher power, what was I supposed to do? And please help me get through this. And I started looking at having cancer from a more eternal perspective. And that all goes back to what I said earlier, that everything happens for a reason. And one of my mantras throughout my life has been that everything happens for me, not to me. And I had gone through a divorce several years before this, which was also a very difficult time. And I was able to push through all the fears and keep moving forward with what I knew was best for me in my life. It was toxic, it was making me sick, and it wasn't serving me. And knowing that I could get through that hard time and seeing how much better I was for it on the other side gave me a lot of hope. And it just helped me to gain some perspective and realize how strong I was, and that I could, if I could get through that, I could get through this as well. And I also believe that disease is an opportunity. It's a nudge from your body. It's a message to compel you to look within and see what changes you need to make. Now, I definitely don't mean to give the impression that I was all totally zen about this and, oh, I knew I got this and, oh, there's a bigger reason. And no, I was not above it all. There was so much back and forth. There was times of deep despair. I remember saying one time, my life is totally fucked. Like, I feel like my life is fucked. I, first of all, am bald. I'm losing all, my hair's falling out. I have to have a mastectomy. My body is going to be all mutilated and scarred, and I'm not able to work. I did work somewhat throughout the treatments, but I had to take a huge step back from a business that I had been putting my heart and soul into and had built up. And I felt like this was just going to completely knock me back down to where I started from. And not only that, COVID was going on in the midst of all this, and I was accruing tens of thousands of dollars in medical debt. And I had so much fear and just still worrying and having so much fear. What if they can't get rid of it? What if it has spread and they don't know? What if it comes back someday? And I definitely had many, many, many days where I just felt hopeless. And there was some moments of anger too. Like, why do I deserve this? Why me? Like, I'm so healthy and I've done everything right. I eat healthy and I exercise and I take care of my body and I'm a good person. Why do I deserve this? And I even sometimes felt like I was being punished, like, was I too conceited? Was I too worried about my body and how I looked? And, I remember thinking my hair has always been one thing that I really liked about myself, something that I've always gotten compliments on. And I felt like God was just saying, oh, you're too conceited. You like your hair? Well, guess what? Now it's all going to fall out. Oh, you exercise. You want your body to look nice. Well, guess what? Now you can't exercise. You're going to be too tired. Oh, and by the way, we're going to cut off both your boobs. So it was very real. And I don't mean to say that I'm just above all that, but I went through many, many stages of grief and anger and all of that stuff and back and forth. But I was able to continuously pull myself out of that. And part of the reason was that I turned to getting help. I realized, like, I can't get through this if I don't find some other ways of getting myself supported. And that applies to every difficult situation that anyone is in. If you feel like you are just spiraling and you just can't deal with this yourself, reach out. I turned to therapy and I got energy healing. I got Reiki. I reached out to friends and I had so much friend and family and loved ones supporting me and listening to me. And I also, meditation was a huge help to me. I found specific meditations about reducing anxiety and even meditations on getting a healthy body and removing cancer from your body and accepting chemotherapy and helping your treatments work better. And all of that helped me regain a sense of control, I guess you would say. I also read a lot of books and got inspiration from other people who had been in my situation and who came out of it. And I read all about nutrition and different things that you can do to strengthen your body and strengthen your immune system. So I did whatever I could to help pull me out of these dark moments. And I think that is something that we can all do in any situation that we're going through that is really, really hard. And going back to what I said earlier about disease is your body giving you a nudge that you need to look within and you need to make some changes. And I really took that seriously. And I was doing a meditation one day and I asked the cancer, "What are you trying to tell me?" And then I was just really still and I just listened. And the voice came through loud and clear and it said, "Slow down." I was and still am a perfectionist. I lived in stress and busyness all the time. I never felt good enough. I never felt like I accomplished enough. I never felt like I got to where I thought I should be. And I was always searching for that external validation, the accomplishments and the kudos and the checking things off and the successes. And I just felt like I always had to prove myself. And when I went within, I realized that I was exhausted. This was exhausting me and I needed rest. I remember fantasizing about, how when celebrities, you'll hear that they went into like a treatment plan or got hospitalized for exhaustion. And I remember always thinking like, oh my God, that would be so great. I want to get hospitalized for a month and just live on some retreat and, meditate and do yoga and have someone feed me and just have therapy and walking in the forest every day. And I was constantly ignoring my body's signals that I needed to slow down. I was anxious all the time and I was tired and I just kept pushing and pushing. You need to be better. You need to work harder. You need to work out more. You need to work out harder. And the fact is that if you don't rest, your body will eventually force you to do it. And I thought I couldn't rest for even a day, even an hour even. And guess what? I got knocked down and I had to rest for 1.5 years. And the world just kept right on spinning. Here I am working again, getting back to my old self, exercising. And I took 1.5 years off. So if you are one of these busy, perfectionistic type A people like I am, this can be a lesson for you that doing that constantly will eventually cause illness. I also realized that there was a lot of trauma and emotions from my past that I had been ignoring and had not dealt with. things from my childhood, heartbreak around grieving the loss of my marriage and of the life that I had planned. And I had a lot of shame and blame and things that I needed to work through. And, this is a work in progress. I am not sitting here right now telling you I am all healed. I have dealt with all of my issues and cleansed myself. Not in any way. These are all the perfectionism and dealing with emotions and all of those things are things that we're meant to deal with for a lifetime. It's our life's work. But I have gotten through a lot of steps. And that's why I wanted to talk about it today and just be really honest and see if anything resonates with you and if any of this can help you in some way in your life. I also don't mean to imply in any way that I think I caused my cancer, that my stress and my busyness and all of those things led to getting cancer. My son is a type 1 diabetic and he was diagnosed at age 6. And there's in no way did he cause that or bring it on. I just mean to say that because I believe that everything happens for a reason, this gave me the nudge, the signal, the message from my body that I needed to know that I needed to make some changes. And a lot of times we don't know all the reasons that things happen, and we never will. Sometimes we can figure out some of it and sometimes we can't. But for myself, I know that that was part of the reason that this happened. As I started working through these different steps and these different transformations, the next step was realizing that as a type A, I always want to control things. I always want to push and make things happen. And that I was doing this with the cancer journey. I was so paranoid that I wouldn't learn all the right lessons and that I wouldn't change myself enough and that this lesson isn't going to be enough to teach you what you need. So that means more bad things are going to have to happen to you in the future. And I was just living in that fear and that pushing and that trying to control. And so I took another moment, a lot of moments, and I just have to say that meditation is a huge tool in doing all this. I've never been what I consider good at meditating. I have an anxious mind. My thoughts like to swirl. But I've learned that it doesn't matter. Whatever your mind needs to do, it will do. And that's what's meant to happen. You just need to give it time to let it happen. So you've got to sit still. You've got to be still and you've got to just let this process happen. And that was the message that came through. That was sort of my next phase was, and this was huge. This was probably the biggest lesson. And this is one that I continue to work on as well. And that is be still and allow and receive, because these changes are going to happen for you. You don't have to force them to happen. You just have to allow them to happen. And that's something I have to tell myself every single day. Be still, allow, and receive. And the last thing that I want to leave you with is talking about fear and talking about getting through the fears. So when I was going through this journey, people kept saying to me, "You're so brave, you're so brave." And I thought, no, I'm not. I'm not brave. This is just happening to me. I don't have any choice but to, keep getting the treatments and keep, putting one foot in front of the other and living one day after the next. And I didn't feel like I was brave at all. I was terrified. There is two kinds of bravery. One is when you want to do something and you're scared of it and you choose to feel the fear and do it anyway. So my divorce is an example of that. I knew I wanted to be in a better place. I was terrified to go through that, but I did it anyway. And then the second one is when you're faced with the situation that you can't control and you can't avoid. I didn't consider myself brave at the time, but looking back now, I realize that I found ways to survive it emotionally. I went to therapy and I did my meditations and I tapped into my strength and my ability to keep picking myself up after being knocked down. Every single chemotherapy session knocked me on my ass. And every single time I did what I needed to do to heal myself physically and emotionally after that treatment. And I kept having to go to another treatment and another treatment. I had 20 altogether, and I had 25 radiation treatments, and I had 3 surgeries. It was a long, long journey, and I realized you got to take it one step at a time. You can't look at everything that is ahead of you because it is just too overwhelming. You've got to break it down into bite-sized pieces, and this applies to everything in life, no matter how small, at work, at home, everything day to day. If you can stop looking at the big, huge picture and all the fears and all the overwhelm, you can focus on one step at a time and get through that step and do what you need to do to survive it and then move on to the next thing. So I hope all this is helpful for you. I hope that you can see that this can apply to any situations in your life and that you have it in you. I didn't know how strong I was, and you never know how strong you are until you're faced with a situation, and you are strong too. And whatever you are going through, you can get through it. Hey, if I can get through it, anyone can. So I just want to leave you with that. And I am sending so much love out to you all who are dealing with really hard situations. I know my situation was hard, and I know a lot of you are dealing with equally difficult things in your life. So just know that you are loved, you are supported, you are strong, and you are enough. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.